Hi, my name is Eve Ashworth. I know some of you. I live on Mountain View Road, up on the ridge, and I do oppose this power plant. It is a power plant. If you go look at Oakwood School and see what they did, that's a 2-acre solar farm, and it looks like a power plant. You can go and see that in Poughkeepsie. Contrary to what you may believe, I'm not opposed to renewable energy. In fact, I personally am having geothermal in my house right now, and I was in negotiations with Hudson Solar to put panels on my roof. However, I stopped all discussions after I heard of this. I think is a shocking thing. I really feel as though Württemberg is a very quaint, historic hamlet where young families have built homes and bought homes, purchased homes and didn't know about this power plant coming into the area, which I think should very much come into consideration. I believe that there is place for all things that are good, and I think this is a good thing. I think that solar panels on homes and solar plants and solar farms are good things, but I don't think they belong in the quaint little town of Württemberg. As far as I can tell from the studies, there is still no plan in this application at all for the disposal of the solar panels. So if Hudson Solar go out of business, or anybody changes direction in any way, these can be left, and they are supposedly 300 times more toxic than in waste per unit of electricity generated than nuclear power plants. I stand with over 100 neighbours in opposing this. I think it would adversely affect the neighbourhood. I think that you have to take into considerations, is it okay that Whole Foods comes into Rhinebeck, and we okay Whole Foods to come in and they take out Rhinebeck health food store? You know, just because we believe in something, in healthy food or in solar panels or in this renewable energy, doesn't mean that they should put it in the middle of this beautiful little town or in this beautiful little neighborhood. I feel terribly about the fact that we feel so unheard, the people who oppose this project. I feel alone, and I don't feel alone in this. We were not informed in the planning board's considerations of this project, and thus, and those of us who are contiguous landowners, such as Amanda, who, by the way, when people refer to Amanda, they refer to all the people that she backs and that she stands up for and voices her opinion on behalf. Further, the town supervisor posted a negative and triumphant message on her Facebook page about this, about the failure of a suit by residents who are also her constituents, which I felt was really a terrible thing that she did that. The tone was completely inappropriate and very inconsiderate, and certainly over the line of neutrality on this issue. When I commented, instead of her opening up a conversation with me, she called me a NIMBY. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong to call people names when you don't know what their side of the argument is. The fact is that none of our part of the road was used in part of this study. Now, my trees have not been cleared, but my neighbour's trees have been cleared. And I can tell you right now, before she purchased the house, the trees were cleared. I can tell you right now, she can see this solar farm from her house. And I think it's wrong that someone can come and invest in property value and get the glare from south-facing panels, that she will be able to see this right in her view. This was never taken into consideration. There are many places to put these power plants. It shouldn't be in this area, and I really feel as though you need to there needs to be a permanent plan in place about the environmental impact, an assessment and a clean-up bond put in place to see, to figure out what it is that you're going to be able to do if this fails, if this plan fails. What is it you're going to do to clean up this mess that I'm going to be able to see, or the people that purchase my home? By the way, I'm in my house. I live in the house that I will retire in. I've owned it for the last 15 years. And you know, I think it's a problem that you should go ahead and be able to do this to people's lands and properties and think that it's okay. These young families have come in, they're going to have kids. They're going to be, if animals can get under these fences, then little kids can get under these fences. And what happens if a child is hurt in any way on any of these solar panels? Take that into consideration at least. I have 3 boys, they're now teenagers. They still go out on those woods and rummage around in the fields and in the woods all the way down. They go all the way down to the waterfall, all the way along Württemberg Road. I know they do. And they go bear hunting, they do all types of stuff back there. I don't know, but they're out there for hours. I can tell you right now, they'll be in those solar panel fields and it's not okay. It's not safe.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dave Clipon. I live at 340 Württemberg Road, along with my wife, Jonna Paolella. The house is on the National Register, and I just wanted to point out that if you go on Wikipedia and you go to the page that says National Register homes or properties in Dutchess County, there are about 120, and 4 of those are listed as Württemberg, actually specifically as Württemberg. And the property that we're talking about is adjacent to 2 of those, including our home. Just pointing that out. I have some questions and concerns, mostly, that we discussed. One was about property value depreciation. Talking about Google Earth and people coming in and taking a look, they certainly will see the property, the solar panels from the aerials, and will consider that. You know, we're concerned whether that would be a detriment to buying a property in the area, such as ours. And one of the questions is it? And you know, when I ask that question right now, it's sort of the jury is out. So is there? I just wanted to make sure: is there anything the board knows how to do to evaluate whether or not something like this has an impact to property values? It's sort of a question. I don't know if that, you know, I'm assuming that there isn't, but I was just curious to know if there is any consideration or possibility. Is there any way of determining that?
We'd certainly welcome any information from the assessor's office, real estate, anything like that that someone could provide us with, and we'll put their name on as well. We have all sorts of anecdotal evidence on both sides of this issue, but no one to date has been willing to put their name to it, saying, yes, this is what I find to be the case. Obviously, we need, you know, good information we can rely on, that someone is willing to, you know, put their name to, so that we have that.
It's also one of our responsibilities to take that into consideration.
Into consideration. There's no...
How we accomplish that, I think, is probably something new.
Yeah, that's right. I just figured I'd bring that up. That is I'm not sure how that's done, so I'm just asking that question. I guess that's obviously one of our concerns is that what it does say is that the neighborhood in our community is being considered basically a guinea pig or potential collateral, depending. I mean, maybe value will go up, but in all likelihood, values could go down if the solar farm is seen as a plant by incoming people. What that goes together with is the additional property usage. My wife and I went to see Ron Evangelista before he left, and he pointed out that this is an accessory usage. So there's currently no primary usage. One question we had is whether it requires a primary use.
I think Ron assumed that it was going to be an accessory use, like solar panels on a residential property is indeed an accessory use to the residential use of the property. But a solar farm is a primary use, a principal use.
It is a principal use.
Yes, a solar farm. There are 2 different sections in the zoning law on solar, one dealing with residential, you know, ground-mounted rooftop, and the other dealing with solar farms as basically the principal use on that property. That's why I think Richard or Eric was raising the question about co-principal uses. If you were to have a solar farm and a residence on a property, the law does allow co-principal uses along those lines. But in this case, given this application, the solar farm is the principal use for this property. As far as this application is concerned.
I'll review it again. How do you think he was confused on that? Because he was reading the law.
I say that we already discussed this, and we didn't have an answer, and we were going to throw it at John.
No, it's right.
I know that we sat here at a meeting, and we said, well, how do you determine if they build a house on a property? Now you have principal use and principal and co-principal.
Right.
So which one is the principal and which one is the co-principal?
They'd be both
They'd
principal.
both be principal.
Co-principals
two
are
principals.
equal.
Right.
So I thought one was labeled subservient to the
No,
other.
no.
No, that's the,
No.
that's the
Not in the
principal
law?
accessory
That's,
aspect.
that's in the accessory use of something. The principal use in a residential home would be the
Okay.
principal use.
I'll go back and read it.
And the solar, if you had solar on a residential property, the solar is there in an accessory use. It's not a co-principal use, it's an accessory use.
So if it became residential, that would just be a co-principal use.
Correct.
Okay, so now does it still allow accessory uses? Because that was also Ron Evangelista's point, is that, well, he saw it as an accessory use, but even as a primary, it would still allow other accessory uses. I mean, part of the examples were cell tower or pig farm or something like that. And our impression was that those are still allowed despite the fact that there's a solar farm on the property.
It would be.
Well, the interesting thing about accessory uses are usually considered that are normally associated with specific principal use. Like a residence, you'd have a swimming pool potentially, or a garden shed, or something like that.
Right.
With a solar farm as a commercial use, what would be a normal accessory use to that? You see, that becomes an issue.
Is that clear? I mean,
To clarify
Yeah.
the point that you're raising,
Sure.
I'm going to quote directly from the ordinance.
They're still allowed to put a pig farm in there, though.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah,
question, no?
and it discourages the use of a primary dwelling, so the other uses, because there's plenty of more acreage left, is the potential for other accessory uses, or whatever is allowed, and that potentially compounds the value, or the decrease of the value of the surrounding properties, and that's a concern we wanted to express.
Okay, well, you're thinking that if we're, let's say, the solar farm were there and someone then put in a residence, then there are accessory uses to residential use that could then also go on the property.
Okay, and there could be,
Yes.
right, and there could be continued
Yes,
ones.
because they'd be co-principal uses, so they're both considered principal uses, so anything that could be considered an accessory use under normal circumstances to a principal use could indeed go on the property. Yes.
Okay, then I guess to back it up, one of the questions is, can there be a pig farm on the property?
Agriculture is allowed throughout
Any district.
Rhinebeck, in any district in the town outside of the hamlet of Rhinecliff. So
Okay.
they could do that right now.
All right, but there's nothing, the other one is because it's a solar farm, and because this is for the solar law or for the zoning changes, but at this point, there's no restriction to it, but just being a solar farm or a solar plant in other words, disallowing other accessory uses. That's not the case.
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. But anything that anyone wished to do on that property, because they're going to have a site plan for
In
this
addition,
particular
right.
use,
We saw the
they're going to
site.
have to go through a hearing process with the planning board to ensure that no matter what they do there, in no way contravenes any of the conditions the planning board would have put on the solar farm.
Okay.
I was
So,
going to answer the question that
Sure,
you
sure.
raised about principal use versus, solar power plants, I'm reading directly from the ordinance, 12547I. Solar power plants shall be permitted as a principal or co-principal electric generating use in the historic preservation, rural agricultural, rural countryside, residential low-density, business park, Gateway North, office research park, utility corridor, civic 2, and mining overlay districts, subject to both authorization of a special use permit and site plan approval by the planning board. So that's
that's right, that part.
that's right from the bylaw.
Okay. All right, and so it is a legitimate, I guess our point is that there's a legitimate concern that potential additional accessory uses could compound the property value decrease. That's, I guess, the point I was looking to make. There's nothing that's restricting other uses for the property. And it's not a change, I'm just pointing that out as a concern. Okay, all right, thank you. Two things from a previous meeting I just wanted to point out quickly. One was about electricity. One of the reasons for the solar farm to be at the property was to access three-phase wires that are running through our backyard. They go about 35 feet from our bedroom. As a matter of fact, we called Central Hudson and confirmed that based on the size, there's no increase in current that is going into the lines. There's no need for additional capacity. And I wanted to point out that Jeff Irish did visit our house last year and discuss this. So we appreciate that, and everything is consistent with what he had said. So that's a positive thing. Although we don't like having power lines in our backyard, if we could change that, we could. It's not a concern. There is a site plan we saw, but we discussed a visual rendering or a mock-up. Considering the scale of the number of panels, there was consideration for what it would look like on the ground. So I don't know if anything's proceeded with that, or if there's any.
Are you discussing, like, on the property, doing mock-ups of what a panel would look like on the property?
No, it's more of a visual mock-up, like a diagram that would show.
More of a model like an architect might do?
Visually, yeah.
Yeah.
Because the concern there was the number of panels is large.
That's kind of what we have right now.
Oh, yeah.
But what I'd like to think,
But this
and
is
I
just
think
the
that
overhead.
when we reconvene the public hearing on the 16th, that we actually have a large color depiction of that, so at least you actually can see.
He's talking more schematic.
Can it be an action then, or, I mean, that's something that can be done?
I think we can certainly, something we can ask for.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what you're asking for.
Yeah, it was brought up at the last meeting, or last discussion point, and so, yeah, it would be a benefit just to see, to get a sense of.
Elevations, like from different sides, like looking from the south property line?
Yeah, I guess, right,
like
that would be
that.
fine. It's mostly for how big the grid would look.
So you're looking
From
more
a-
for
from
a
a
big
ground
site
point.
plan, but from different points on the ground?
Well, just from,
See a
yeah.
bird's eye. He wants to see
Okay.
it looking straight on.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because it's, I think we've estimated it was about 27 rows of quite a few, 50 watt, I don't recall exactly, but it was a large grid. And, what looks small here may look big from the ground. And just wanted to see that to evaluate. And last thing, there was, back in 2000, we all got up here and put stickers on the board to tell, what we wanted to do with our comprehensive plan when the changes were made. And the number one thing that came up was preserving open space. And, it's a bit surprising to us that, and this goes with the zoning law, the change that, historic preservation area, the HP 20 and rural countryside, as well as other zones are allowed for, what this is, it's a commercial for-profit power generating or solar farm that goes into Central Hudson's, as far as we see, Central Hudson's grid. So it is available to everybody. This has been pointed out a couple times tonight. And the point there is just a perception that it's not necessarily Rhinebeck for Rhinebeck. We definitely appreciate that there's consideration for residential roof-mounted and ground-mounted solar, and we've heard the benefits of that. But this is different. The perception should be different in terms of the fact that it is commercial. It's not necessarily for the immediate community, and that needs to be, we can consider whether it's for the greater community, but I just wanted to bring that up as a concern because it doesn't, perception-wise, it's not benefiting us as much as something that was done by the municipality for the municipality or something of that nature. So I just wanted to bring that up again. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jonna Paolella, residing at 340 Wurtemberg Road. I just wanted to make mention that that's where the bed and breakfast is, and a bed and breakfast defined by the town of Rhinebeck has to happen in a, it happens in a residence, an owner-occupied residence. So it was mentioned by Hudson Solar's representative that there was commercial, we got lumped in with a church I didn't think was commercial either, but just I wanted the record to note that it is a primary residence. And I feel that we might have been, the code that was written, and maybe I wasn't staying on top of all of the goings-ons of when this was being written, right? But I can't help but feel that we were left vulnerable by including rural countryside and the historic district for a commercial entity such as this. That there, you rattled off, Mr. Broad, all of the zones that this can take place in. And it seems to me that it should really happen in a place where, if Rhinebeck is so proud of being solar, which we have looked at having solar on our property. And unfortunately, with a 100-year-old metal roof, we've been advised against it on the rooftop. Unfortunately, we don't have the land, so I can appreciate wanting to participate in something like this. I'm an advocate for solar, and I think that Rhinebeck should get behind something like this. But to go and put it in the historic districts and the rural countryside, it's sort of why we have plenty of other districts that they can go into. And if it's something that you want to announce as, you know, we are progressive, well, then put it in a commercial district and let it be visible so that it is a commercial for solar and for that Rhinebeck is progressive. That's, you know, that's okay. I just don't think this commercial entity, and it is a for-profit commercial entity that Rhinebeck residents don't benefit from. They could just as easily benefit from participating in other existing, you know, community solar farms. I just don't think that this is the right spot for it.
Thank you. I guess there's just one thing I just sort of like to point out. No, you all can, that's okay. Is that I think there's some confusion about the process that we're going through here. When you think that the RC5 district is virtually everything in the town of Rhinebeck east of 9G, it's everything. It's all different types of land. And the whole idea behind what we're doing here today is that we have a site-specific project that we can look at that in detail and see whether or not a project of any sort on that use table list we have in the zoning law belongs on a specific property. You're not going to get that at the town level where they're passing a law. They're not going to be able to look. I think there are 3,800 properties that they would be looking at, and at the level of detail we're looking at, just think the money that would cost. I mean, we'd all be broke. So the whole process here, and that's why we're going through this, and that's why we want to hear from you, and that's why we're trying to have every study we can have done and have the studies that are done looked at by other studies, is to ensure that on this site-specific proposal, on this site-specific area, whether or not this fits here, I think it's the best way to do it because it does require a very close look at the specifics of a site and listen to the people who live by it and listen to what's going on. That's why the law itself, that's why the law is passed the way it is. Certain things are allowed in a district if they can be shown to do no harm, if they can be shown to be something that can work there without having negative impacts on the surrounding area and the other neighbors. And this is the only way you can really do that and really look at a site-specific thing. And that's why we're doing this and taking the time to do it. And everything we can think of from a study-wise trying to require that so that we are not misinformed about the specifics of this site as opposed to a generic review.
I do want to thank the board and really everybody who has dedicated so much time and is really going over this quite thoroughly. I do really truly appreciate that.
Well,
I think that should you consider this and move forward with it and approve it, I think something that needs to be considered is making it the only thing that happens on that 16 acres.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that leaving us vulnerable to what else can happen there is really not suitable.
Yeah.
And so I would ask the board to seriously consider that if this does get approved, that it should be required to rent, because then that gets rid of the whole, well, out the trees that are outside of the 16 acres, the 1.8 acres, whatever, the 2-acre thing that he's leasing, is he going to take care of that? Or if he's required to lease all 16 acres, and he's required to maintain all of the trees, the fences for this, and this way nothing else can happen on that. That's what its dedicated use is still the 1.8 acres of solar panels, but then no other additional uses on the land.
Yeah, the extent to which we can put conditions on are fairly broad. I would certainly, and I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I don't think that's a bad suggestion. I would definitely want to check with our lawyer to make sure we can do something like that. And it may become one of the requirements of the screening that we may be getting back from the person that was working with us to say that in order to really maintain screening on a site like this, because of such as what just happened on Friday, how could I forget? Things do happen, and things do deteriorate, and things often go through cycles. And I think if we were to approve this, we want to make sure we approve it with a screening conditions that are such that you can't guarantee everything. If a fire went through like that in California, yeah, you're going to see a lot of crap. There's no question. But taking reasonable precautions, I think, is something that we do try to do, and we do want to do. We do take it seriously. We don't want anything going in that's going to harm any of the people in the neighborhoods in this community. We really don't.
And that's the other thing is that, virtually everybody on the road is against it. And so I feel like you guys should be representing the residents of Rhinebeck. And if everybody is against it, who's actually there, right, then shouldn't that be...
Why are you here? Part of the problem is the law is written such that the applicant has a right to apply if they can meet certain conditions to get the application before the planning board. Legally, we have to go through that process. We have to look at it. It is both sides. I understand what you're saying, and we do care about what the people say because you're bringing before us, considerations that we may not have thought of before. But legally, we're required to go through the process of review to see whether or not, your concerns are legitimate, whether or not they can or cannot be mitigated to the point where they don't become concerns or they will not negatively impact anything. We're required by law to do that as a planning board. It does not mean that the concerns of the neighbors are not considered. They are. But we can't just say, no, the neighbors don't want it, so you can't do it. We would be in court so fast, and the town would lose, and the town could well suffer serious financial damages as well. So basically, we're doing what we have to do by law.
You're so good at what you do and articulating everything, and so I'm appreciative.
Thank you.
If you check with the lawyer regarding the leasing situation, have them get notified, or do you need to check it back to see?
Oh, you're going to hear all about it. Anything we find out, any conditions, anything like that, we're going to make available to everybody. None of this is going to be something you're not going to see. It's all going to be made perfectly, fully available.
I'm sorry, is that a notification list, like an email?
It could be that we can notify certain people at the at the different hearings, at the different public hearings we have on the April 2nd meeting. I hope to have a discussion with our attorney about exactly how we should structure a lease. And if I can come up with answers, if he can, come up with something that I can understand, I will do my very best to then communicate it to all of you, because I think it's important that you all know exactly what's going into this if it does go forward.
Follow up on meetings.
It's about the only thing we can do in this community. We don't have a local newspaper anymore. We don't have a lot of the different things we used to have where we would all get together and we would, the Kilmers, something like that. We don't have that. So we do the best we can, and we try to, and we know we don't always get out to everybody. And not everybody is online. Some of us aren't on Facebook, so we don't get any of that stuff either. It isn't the easiest thing, but we do try to get the information out. And please feel free to give Gretchen a call at any time, and she can, say, is there anything new in? Is there anything coming up? And she will tell you. I mean, she's very good that way. She's better with it than I am, and she will definitely let you know. Yes, you can all, it's not a public hearing, but you can hear everything we're saying up here and exactly why we're saying it and where we think we're going. Yes, everything we do at these meetings is open to the public for you to come and listen. And
The next workshop
is April 2nd, and then the public hearing itself will be opened on April 16th to discuss what you hear at the workshop, to discuss other concerns. I'm hoping Mr. Jane's analysis will be here to see what he's saying, what he's suggesting, things of that sort.
But, Michael, the workshop is not open for public comment.
Well, it's not open for public comment. It's just us working something out. But the next meeting, it will be. And then you'll have heard what we said, and you will be in a position to comment. Yes?
So one thing, I think John sending us the documents, like all the studies, was helpful. I put them on Google Docs. Everyone that's in our group was able to access them. The only issue is there was inexplicably pages missing. So
Please let us know.
I just noticed that today, honestly. Otherwise, I would have. As I was looking through it, I noticed that like a sentence, like the word structure was just on one page with a period, and like, you know what I mean? I finally noticed it.
Amanda,
yeah.
somebody made a mistake in this building with double-sided copies. That's what happened. I received, as consultant to the board, I received that particular study in the same fashion, and I flagged it immediately.
Got it. Unfortunately, I didn't flag it literally until today.
It was every other page.
But that is one way of doing it, because I am savvy with computers. I can, the files, for whatever reason, even though they're only 4 pages, were like, 8,000 megabytes, so they had to be like FTP'd or whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to rebut a few points. One is, I think what you're alluding to, Michael, which is you guys are Rhinebeck's planning board. I don't exactly know how you all are appointed, whether Spinzia just appoints you or it's the whole town board, and those people are elected by us because we pay taxes here.
The town board appoints us.
And I appreciate that, someone from Red Hook wants to come here and say whatever they want about me and poo-poo all of us, but, it is our community. We're the ones who have to live near it. Unless you really go to church over on Wurtemberg Road, I can't imagine what you would be doing from Red Hook driving by this power plant. And so that person's never going to have to see this thing. They can go to the shops in town and the restaurants and go on their merry way. We have to live with it. Some of us have to live next to it, which gets to the next point. Someone sort of, made a comment about, oh, well, maybe someone might occasionally see it from their second floor window. That person, Nick, is and was very upset by that, because when you go to sell your house and someone goes to look upstairs and they look out the window and they see a power plant and panels, they might be less inclined to buy the house, or maybe they still want to buy it, but they're going to offer you $20,000 less. So for most people, their homes are their largest financial asset. And that's what we're talking about here. I don't own 2 homes, so maybe the luxury of that is different. This person can pick one or the other, but this is our only home. It costs us a lot of money, and we put a lot of work into it, and we really like it. And the thought of all of that, being diminished or having a ceiling on what we can possibly resell it for because of this power plant that we all feel doesn't belong here is honestly heartbreaking. Also, if you look in Gary DeMoro's website, a lot of his listings have drone videos. I'm not a real estate agent, but part of living up here, you get to show someone the expanse of the property, whatever a drone video conveys to a potential buyer. So it's not just someone Googling the house and going to Google Earth, which people do. I did it. Jacqueline Murray did it. It's also recognizing that, I don't know when the last time any of you bought a house was, but I just bought one 2 or 3 years ago. And I think the way people are buying homes because of technology is changing. Again, there's drone videos in Gary DeMoro's website, and, people have Google Earth and can look at, you want to look at what's around you. That's just what you want to do. So those are the only points I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, actually, but then, and we'll have her and then you, if that's okay.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan C., and I live in Grinnell Street in Rhinecliff, which is the hamlet of Rhinebeck. I'm just going to read a letter that I wrote, and I'll give you a copy. My name is Susan C., and I've been a full-time resident of Rhinecliff since 1989. As some of you are aware, I built a house on my property about 6 years ago. And at the time, I approached Hudson Solar because I felt a sense of urgency about weaning myself off of fossil fuels and into renewables. It wasn't practical at the time because there are trees surrounding the area that I would have had to remove in order to make it worthwhile, besides the fact that it would be on my roof and visible from the street, and also not optimal orientation or size to take advantage of solar energy to full capacity for my usage. If you're familiar with Rhinecliff, you'll know that my situation is not unique. Both Rhinecliff and the village of Rhinebeck are comprised largely of closely spaced dwellings. In Rhinecliff, an acre is huge. I myself am on a 0.2 acre lot. There's also a healthy and beautiful amount of tree coverage that would be a shame to have to remove to take advantage of solar. I was so excited to hear about the possibility of a solar CSA and that all of the obstacles of having on-site solar would be removed and the panels would be able to be installed to maximize their capacity. As a retired architect and having come before this board for various projects, it's clear that from the positions that the planning board has taken in the past, that aesthetic concerns are a priority, especially with regard to Rhinecliff and its special status. How much more pleasing will it be not to have solar panels intermittently dot the hamlet structures, but to have them in a carefully sited location where the results of the visual study by the Saratoga Associates have determined that they will be minimal visual impact. And I do think, I wasn't aware of this extra study, but I do believe that if there is any visual impact, it must be mitigated. In light of the results from the independent studies, the other studies that Hudson Solar has commissioned, it seems that the major previous concerns expressed at prior meetings have been found to be unwarranted or mitigated by subsequent plans of actions taken on the part of Hudson Solar. Therefore, I believe that there should be no further delay in accepting this proposal to give the community the option for clean energy. It would be great to see the town of Rhinebeck play a leadership role in encouraging sustainable energy practices that are so necessary in light of our plight with regard to global climate change. Thank you for your attention on this matter.
Thank you.
I'm afraid I can't stay. I just want to say...
Say yea or nay.
I'm Susan Charrett, and I live at 325 Wurtemberg Road, which is a private horse farm, and it represents a dream for me. I selected it because of the rural environment, and frankly, I'm scared. You know, I feel as if I'm becoming a victim, possibly not, you know, through any criticism of the process, but I feel as if eminent domain or something like that, where individual sacrifice has to serve a large interest that doesn't really have anything but, from what I can see, a negative impact on me and my investment and my lifestyle. Because of the commercial ramifications of this project. I'm all for solar. I've investigated solar roof tiles. I've been waiting, in fact, for them to become publicly available to be able to avail myself of renewable energy. But it just seems that the price is so high to have a commercial facility, you know, within such close proximity to my property. You know, nobody's communicated very much to me directly. Nobody's visited my site. I'm, after all, 50 feet from the karate property, and I'm pretty certain there's going to be a visual impact for me, and just a psychological impact of, you know, having chosen a rural environment. I don't mean to be selfish, but, you know, this is what our lives are about, and that the future could be so radically different for these plans is just frightening. So I just have to say that I hope you consider, you know, I've been in Rhinebeck for close to 20 years, and I'm an advocate of change, but changing from what was once an agricultural mecca to, you know, a more futuristic is very difficult to deal with. And it's, you know, I think I represent the point of view of many of my neighbors, and I'm not, you know, well-versed in the legal aspects, but anyway, I just wanted to express myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Murray. I own an adjacent parcel at 361 Wurtemberg Road. I want to point out that the Saratoga, the visual analysis, listed my property wrong. So yes, Amanda, it was sloppy. They listed it at as 376, and it's 361. So just to make that clear for the record. I also just want to talk a little bit about the visual analysis. I'm an adjacent property owner. I was not contacted about this study. Nobody came to my property. Just wanted to note that. If you look at the diagrams, it kind of looks like it because they have like a line from my house to the site, but nobody ever came to my house. So I just wanted to note that. I also wanted to say that the visual analysis, it's not only, people don't buy their houses just because of the house itself and what it looks at. They also buy it because of the property. When you walk around your property, you want to be able to look around and enjoy what's around you. So I think the visual analysis also, even for the sites that it did visit, I just want to say that, you know, it should take into consideration not only the residential structure, but the whole property. What else here? So when I purchased my home on Wurtemberg Road, I closed July 28th. And like I've said before, when I was looking for a house, it was zoned, you know, we're zoned RC5. There was no industrial use that could be put on that land. And I looked this up because I don't want to live near a power plant. I don't want to live near, you know, an industrial site. So I just want to reiterate that people do research before they buy property. And if I went on Google Maps and saw a big solar array, I probably wouldn't even go look at the house, to be honest with you. And when I purchased that house, that's the biggest investment I'll probably ever make in my life. My house is modestly sized. The size of my parcel is it's just a little bit bigger than the proposed solar array. So, you know, for me, the size of the solar array is the same size as my property, which is like crazy to me and a little scary. What else do I want to say here? Yeah, and I just think that it's going to hurt property values. I don't think it's a question. If there's less people who are willing to live near a power plant, the value goes down. That's just, you know, supply and demand. It diminishes the pool of people who are looking to live at that house. Another thing with the noise study, I had brought this up before, and the noise study, although it, you know, addressed, you know, the noise from the inverters, I also was concerned about any electromagnetic interference or radio frequency interference that would cause by that amount of power. So when it's tied into the grid, if there's any interference, will we hear a humming, you know, a buzz noise at night? Oh, we're going to sleep, and now we have this annoying buzzing to listen to because of the sound of the energy going into the power grid. Also, just like everybody in Wurtemberg is opposing it. Not one person. There was one person who wrote in that I know of who doesn't even own land. They rent. They supported it. Everybody else opposes it. And if we all oppose it and we all think it's going to hurt our property values, then like I don't understand why it hasn't been denied yet. Like what? If there's so many people and there's so many parcels of land and there, you know, and basically these things can go anywhere, there's probably a parcel out there where everybody can be happy, you know? Nobody here is like against solar. I feel like that's what our neighborhood is being portrayed as, that we're like these horrible people who hate solar. And that's just not the case, and it's just not the right place for it. And then there was one other thing I wanted to bring up, and I had emailed Michael about this. And that was that just within the solar law, I'm just a little bit confused because there's different definitions of like lot coverage and how solar panels are computed. And I'm just confused about it still. Because okay, so there's one area of the law, where is it here? That pertains, so section 125.47, which governs small-scale ground-mounted solar installations. But basically, that part of the law defines the lot coverage as the area both beneath and between ground-mounted and freestanding solar collectors, within the, i.e. within the regular geometric form cited above, shall be included in calculating whether the parcel meets the maximum permitted building coverage and lot coverage and minimum space standards. So that's just for ground mounted, that's for like residential ground mounted, is that clear? So I just don't understand that why under the solar power plant section of the law, which is 12547, it just gives a total area of the solar module surface area at 36,000 square feet. But that conflicts, because if you're going by that definition, like what's the definition of how much space these things take up? Because if you go with the other definition, they're over their lot coverage, and so I don't understand that discrepancy in the law, and I don't understand why a solar power plant that's 2 acres isn't maxing out its lot coverage on a 15-acre parcel. It seems like it should have to be at least 28 acres to have a 2-acre plant. So I don't know if anybody can clarify that for me.
I don't know if I can clarify the way it was done, but the decision was apparently made to have 2 distinctions. One was for the residential to determine the size, and the other was to basically base the maximum size on the number of panels, the size of the panels, and they didn't add anything into there about the ground itself in terms of, as they did for the residential. For some reason they didn't. Perhaps it was an oversight in the law. There may well have been a reason for doing it that way. I don't know. But oftentimes you'll find something in one part of a law, but it's not in another part of the law.
I would just think that would be in there because they don't want like a resident putting a huge, array. They have to limit it to the size, but I don't understand why it's different for a solar power plant. So I just want to bring that up because that might come up.
Can we take this under the law and take the 1,560 panels and spread them out 10 feet?
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
There will be no difference?
Apparently, yes.
So just surface area.
In the law, there were two different sets of criteria. With respect to the residential accessory or any sort of an accessory facility, there was a requirement, a maximum lot coverage situation that came into play, as well as a maximum square footage of panels for that sort of an installation. It was a small number, I forget if it was 4,000, 6,000, whatever it happened to be. For the larger installation that we're talking about here, the solar power plant, quote unquote, the standards that were applied were the square footage, maximum square footage limitation on the square footage of the panels, an aggregate of the panels at 36,000, coupled with a maximum fenced area or a maximum for the plant of what, 2 acres roughly?
2.2.
Yeah, so that was the substitute for that was the substitute for the coverage that you see with respect to the accessory.
And it could be any shape.
It could be any shape.
Square footage within that 2.2 acres.
Exactly.
But it does require a minimum lot size of 10 acres for this to be positioned on.
Michael,
I'm sorry?
could you speak into the mic?
Okay. I believe it requires a minimum of 10 acres. A minimum.
I guess I just didn't understand why wouldn't that be proportional? So you can have a 2-acre power plant on this 16-acre parcel, and then you can also build a house on it. You know what I mean? There's like too much you can do in a small space. That's what I think. And I think it doesn't make sense that they're computed differently, because if you're looking at a fenced-in solar array, that's taking up that amount of ground space. That's taking up that's a lot of coverage. So the fact that you can have this 2-acre solar array and then also have other uses. And I also did want to just point out that earlier, when Hudson Solar was mentioning all the different uses, like all of those, they can still be done on that parcel of land. They could have the pig farm and the solar plant. So I just wanted to point that out. And I also wanted to bring up that when I had emailed a letter, I think it was back in October, and I had talked about Mountain View Road a little bit, and I just wanted to bring up the fact that I wrote one last thing in regard to the visual analysis of the site. I believe the analysis should include a survey from viewpoints on Mountain View Road. The Dutchess County Historic Resource Survey denotes at least 3 viewpoints on Mountain View Road that have historical significance. And these viewpoints are directly east and south of the proposed power plant site. So I had encouraged those to be checked out because they are part of that Dutchess County Historic Survey. And that's it. Thanks.
Excuse me, Michael.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding this coverage. If, let's say this was on a 10-acre parcel, and then the co-use was able to have a residential property, and that property wanted then to have a private solar array on their property, would that be precluded from this because they've already maxed out on that solar?
No, the solar that you're talking about, a solar farm.
Yes.
Okay, the solar farm is maxed out. That could not be expanded. That could not be added on to. But if you were entitled to put a residence on the property,
Yeah.
then you were entitled to any normal accessory use to that residential use, such as private solar panels.
But that private array would then be subject to the
Yes,
restrictions?
yes, yes.
Thank you.
Michael, we could also make clear that any potential co-principal use would be governed by the conditions of our site approval for any solar farm.
Absolutely, yes.
That's right. And the minimum acreage in a co-principal situation would be a total of 12.5 acres with a maximum of 2.5 acres devoted to the solar plant. It's 12.5 acres in any district except the HP 20, in which case it would be 22.5 acres as the minimum area that would be involved.
I just wanted to put on the record in terms of concerns of electromagnetic interference and radiation, things like that. I would argue that the power produced from inverters is far cleaner than the power you could see on the electrical grid. That in correlation with the fact that we are at the same voltage and frequency level that we are interconnecting with will produce zero electromagnetic interference that wouldn't already be seen on the power lines that are running by the houses.
Thank you.
Since you're talking about that, how is your electrical contribution to the grid monitored by Central Hudson?
It'll be a net meter, so what they will see is a meter that is a revenue grade meter that they will use to count the energy that is produced by the site, and then it'll be distributed. Yes, and it'll be
They're notorious for dirty electricity. Is that?
Well, smart meter in terms of that it's measuring with a 0.5 degree of accuracy. What is your definition of smart meter, I guess?
Well, the ones that are, using RF to communicate the state of the power to the.
I would have to ask Central Hudson about exactly what meter that they would use. They tend to change the meters that they use on a month-to-month basis. To be honest, I see different meters every single time I go and look at a net meter. One other thing to mention at this is because this project has been approved by Central Hudson right now, it was approved under what they're calling Tranche 1, which is full net metering. So anyone who takes part in this project will get full net metering credits. Any projects in Central Hudson's grid right now that are applied and accepted are now in Tranche 4, which severely limits the value that a project has in terms of what the value the customer gets with their net metering. So.
Hi, my name is Max Parker. I live with Jacqueline at 361 Wurtemberg Road. I don't think this is right. I think there's plenty of better places where this plant could go, and I think you should take into consideration the whole neighborhood is against it, and Hudson Solar can find another place to do this, but we can't find other homes and move around it, or, that's all. I oppose this plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Kristen Page. I live at 209 Wurtemberg Road. I have listened all night to everything about this plan. I've also talked with a lot of my neighbors. A little bit about me is I grew up in Millbrook, and I have a father who is a big part of this community. My family dates back to early 1900s in Millbrook, and I'm feeling very upset by the fact that I just built a house 3 years ago. I absolutely emptied my savings account that I worked for 15 years on saving to buy the land on Wartenberg Road to build a home for me and my family. And my biggest concern is that I'm surrounded by some land that might not be buildable, and that somebody is going to do this right in my front yard. If this can happen down the street from me, what stops it from happening on lots all around me? So that's a huge concern of mine. I have 2 small children, like Eve's, who will be, I'm sure, as they get older, adventuring off on their own down the streets. Friends with Richard Murray's son, Sean, down on the other end, growing up together. This was, a dream for me to build this beautiful home, something I've always wanted to do my whole life. And I love this town, and I love the open land and the residential neighborhood. I also attend that church on Wartenberg Road. I've converted from Catholic to Lutheran because I love the church so much. And I adore everything about it. I adore its surrounding property. I adore all the neighbors I have met, and I'm hoping to meet the rest of you and get to know you all better. And I'm old-fashioned, and I believe in solar. I'm just scared of it. I don't know everything about the impact, so I don't come with as much knowledge about the environmental impact. It does concern me. My husband and me are very concerned about the environmental impact, possibly. We have a lot of family affected by autism and different things of that nature, and nobody still knows what causes these things. So I just want you to know my concerns, that I am totally for solar, and Wartenberg Road is an old, very old historic place, and I just don't believe that solar panels belong on my road. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else tonight?
My name is Jeff Christensen. I live in 37 South Street right here in the village. And like Susan from Rhinecliff, we live in an area where solar panels are not an option for our lot size and our house. It just wasn't possible. So when we heard that Hudson Solar came up with a model that would support close-knit communities to convert to solar, we thought, what a fantastic idea. We're going for this. And then I started to hear some objections by people from the community. And one of the reasons we live here is for the community, because of the people that live here, the neighborhood, the community, and there's a local community and there's a global community, and we think we're doing a great deal for the global community. But I heard a lot of objections I hadn't thought of. And my litmus test would be, if I were adjacent, if I had a house on this property, and if this were my backyard, would I feel comfortable with it? And I don't say that in a negative term. I think it's entirely appropriate that people who are adjacent to this property have concerns. So I looked at all of the information on file here, and we actually took a ride around the neighborhood to take a look at the roads and all. And I have to say that the studies included a lot more concerns than had occurred to me. Biodiversity didn't occur to me. Cultural impact, anthropological impact didn't occur to me. But when I read the studies Office of Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation, Hudson Valley Cultural Resources Consultants. The biodiversity study by Hudsonian I thought was incredibly comprehensive. The visual by Saratoga Associates, which will now be followed up by George James, I think is a pretty critical thing. And the sound studies by Morris Associates, I think, were also very critical, because this is something I'd be concerned with. I've heard a lot tonight from immediate neighbors. I've heard a lot of emotion, some anger, and I've heard some pretty kind of truthful and sensible concerns. And some of the concerns that you voiced are exactly the ones that I would have. I think the sight line is a significant concern. When I looked at the study by Saratoga for the visual analysis, I thought, wow, this is pretty comprehensive. It's got all these views here, and from the second-story window and also. And I thought that that answered the question. People have voiced additional concerns, so I'm glad to hear that George James is going to do a follow-up on that. I don't have, after viewing the rest of these studies, I don't personally have any concerns, if it were my backyard, of the biodiversity impact, the historical impact, the cultural impact, etc. We're here because we like this community and because it's a historic community. So I appreciate, and I think people have very sensitive ideas and concerns about this. One of the things I also heard, two of the people described their position as being scared. So I heard a lot of fear. Susan, before she left, said she's scared, and she's absolutely certain, she said, that they will be visible from her house. So I appreciate she's coming out of fear, and that's why I think the visual impact study that's already been done and the follow-up that George James is going to do is pretty essential. I'm not concerned myself with the sound. I believe the studies that I've heard about the sound, that you're not going to really hear some sound. And I'm not concerned so much that electromagnetics will affect anything. There were concerns that I think are going to be really hard, like the concern for property values and the concern for accessory uses that you raised, which I would also be concerned about. I don't know how you figure out a property value thing, because frankly, any of us that have bought a house know it's all about taste and opinion and what we view our lifestyle to be. I can say this. If I were buying a property and looking at some of the properties along Wurttemberg and the surrounding community, I would much rather have a solar farm that was shielded than a house there. So I would be more concerned that someone would build a house there. And I don't know that there's anything you can do with that. I don't accept the speculation that putting the solar farm as it's proposed, as long as it is shielded visually in the way that people think it needs to be, I don't accept the speculation that it will damage property values. For some people, it will increase their property values. They would say, I would rather be there knowing that that's there and there's going to be probably nothing else, or that that's the type of community that I live in. So I look forward to hearing. The only relevant remaining concern I have, which I think is being addressed, is to hear what's going to be done about the follow-up on the sight line. And I'm going to assume that's going to be positive. And assuming that that is, I urge you to approve this measure. And that's my opinion as a Rhinebeck resident and a World Community resident. And I appreciate everyone's concern.
Thank you.
Hopefully this will be the end. We can all go home. I did recall Richard Kobushinsky came here, and he specifically said that he thought Anconi, is that how you pronounce it, Anconi Farm? Would be, is that how you pronounce it? Anyway, would be a perfect place for a solar farm. And I will note that I think someone is in the process of upgrading that street to three-phase. And so again, perhaps that's a better place for Rhinebeck's residents if the farm is on board. As to, I didn't get your name, the gentleman over there who just spoke, you know, if someone wants to put a power plant, a solar power plant adjacent to his property and all of the neighbors and the community is for it, then I absolutely think that's a great place to put it. That's not the case here. And you have an entire community telling you that we think our property values will be decreased. It's not speculation. Phil Karate submitted you a letter from a real estate agent who put his name on it, or her name, I can't remember, saying that his property value would decrease. And you have Jacqueline Murray, who remember bought her house, and I called up the real estate agent who represented her as well, and I called up the owner, and neither one of them told her about this plant. And she's saying that had she known about it, she wouldn't have bought the property. So it's not speculation. And there are plenty, you know, you might be a buyer who thinks a solar power plant is like, and that's great, I want to live right next to that. That's not us. We're not saying that. And I know that I wouldn't have bought my home had I seen that on Google Maps, because my thought would have been, what's going on there? What's next? That's obviously a commercial site. And I don't want to live next to a commercial site. I want to live next to horses and beautiful, you know, bed and breakfast. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been in the old Rhinebeck Inn, but it's stunning what they have there. It's absolutely stunning. And, you know, Matt Nemetz's place, beautiful. He's bought